Okay, well, in the essence of time, we will get started. And so, again, good morning to everyone. I'm Leonardo McClarty. I'm the president of the Howard County Chamber, and I'd like to welcome you to our quarterly BizBreakfast. And for those of you that are new to the chamber and perhaps new to this format or what have you, the BizBreakfast is something that we do, again, on a quarterly basis. It's one of our core programs for our GovConnects effort. And the whole idea is to bring in various state as well as federal agencies to talk about procurement opportunities and what they may be spending money on, what might be priorities, anything that can give you some insights as to how to go about actually acquiring new contracts, particularly if the customer is the government. And so certainly today, we're excited to have with us Robert or Bob Gleason, who was the Chief Procurement Officer in the Office of State Procurement for the state of Maryland. And so I'm sure many of you are aware of the, excuse me, many of you are aware of the number of different changes that are taking place currently and so forth. So again, excited to have Bob with us at the moment. And so with that, I'm going to just share a couple of slides before I share with you the remaining part of how this morning will work. So first thing, I want to just recognize and acknowledge the Chamber's annual partners. And so our annual partners are those companies that support the Chamber above and beyond just membership dues and perhaps occasionally registering for events and so forth. And so they are led by Tower Federal Credit Union and Uninet, who are our benefactor level sponsors. And then also Harrington, Beatrix, Edwards Performance Solutions, HR New, Prescott HR, and Phoenix TX. And so we certainly thank them for their continued support of the Chamber and the overall program for this year. Also, I want to recognize our actual BizBreakfast sponsors. And our BizBreakfast sponsors are led by Katz Abosh and Hilaire Matza. And so they, again, have supported this particular program throughout the course of this year. Also, just want to here we go. Bring to your attention a couple of upcoming events before we get started. And so next week, we'll actually talk about the road to recovery, what lies ahead. And so we're going to actually have a conversation with Charles York, who is an economist with BNY Mellon, but specifically focused on the government contracting arena. And so that's forthcoming next week. And then the following week, we will actually have our annual economic forecast breakfast with Anabon Basu, who will certainly give a more holistic picture of the state of affairs here in Maryland, but also Anabon always drills it down specifically to Howard County as well. And so that's always extremely helpful. The other thing I want to reference that will be next week also is our annual salute to veterans as part of our as part of our executive speaker series. And so we're going to have Colonel Christopher Nyland, who's the new Fort Lee Garrison commander, as our keynote. And particularly for those of you on here that are veterans, if you are a veteran, you can actually attend this for free. The promo code is veteran, or you can simply email Taylor or myself, and we'll make sure that you get the registration link and so forth. And so with that, I'm going to exit out of here and tell you about the remaining part of the program today. So we're going to actually, before we hear from Bob, we're going to actually get some networking in. I know that one of the things that, many of you participate in the chamber in and join the chamber for is the ability to make new contacts, reestablish existing ones. And so we're going to break out into some breakout rooms, so roughly about maybe 15, probably about 20 minutes or so. And then with that, we're going to come back. We're going to introduce Bob and go into the presentation. One of the things to kind of help as it relates to the discussion in your breakout rooms, two things to keep in mind. The first is, as we start planning for next year, what would be who are you looking to do business with in the coming year? Are there some agencies you would like for us to bring before you? So that's kind of going to be the discussion point. What's on your kind of business development agenda for the coming year again, and who might you like for us to bring? And from a facilitation standpoint, or at least lead, what we're going to do as you get in your groups, whoever is the youngest person in the group, that's going to be the facilitator and the one that's going to kind of maybe take notes for us and send it back. So that'll also add some, I guess, fun conversations as you go around and introduce yourself to one another. And again, whoever's the youngest person will be kind of the one that will ultimately be the facilitator here. And so with that, Taylor, let's see, are we ready for the breakouts or?
We should be. I believe they're all set up. I just don't have that view on my end.
Okay, so give us a little bit of, I guess I would say patience for a second. We are, this is one of those where, because we're using WebEx here, we're somewhat feeling our way in the dark a little bit on some of the back end pieces because we tend to do more things in Zoom. And so with that, here we go. All right.
Mm.
And we're back, and I can see that that wasn't so painful after all. And so hopefully each of you enjoyed the opportunity to be able to meet some new people and have some conversations in a smaller group format and setting, and certainly able to maybe meet some folks that you maybe want to follow up with in the days ahead and so forth. And perhaps what I'll do maybe to further spark some of the dialogue is we could easily come back and share, this group of attendees with people if you want to end up having some follow up. And what I would say perhaps so that no one is contacted perhaps that maybe does not want to be contacted, if you want to just drop me a line, via email and say, hey, don't share my info or what have you, then certainly we'll make sure you do that. Otherwise, I think it will, again, we want to definitely facilitate the opportunity for people to be able to network and meet new folks. And so, and that's, part of what makes the quote BizBreakfast, the BizBreakfast, because it is about business and creating opportunity and so forth. But with that, enough from me. We're going to now get ready to turn things over to our featured speaker today, and that is Mr. Robert Gleason, or Bob Gleason. And just quickly, he currently serves as the Chief Procurement Officer for the state of Maryland and is charged with modernizing and transforming the state's procurement processes, develop a new career procurement workforce, create a new Maryland Procurement Academy, and design and implement the new eMaryland Marketplace Advantage e-procurement program, which is intended for use by all state public agencies. And Bob's been around for several years in a number of different government capacities, and I won't get into those details and so forth, as I will spare you that per his request. And so with that, I will turn things over to Bob, and Bob, the screen is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. McClarty. So I've got a little bit of technical challenge here. First of all, I'm not all that used to WebEx, so I'm going to try to share the screen. And then I'm further complicated by having two screens. So I'm told by my expert that I have to switch from one screen to the other to do the presentation. So let me go ahead, and we'll have plenty of time for discussion as well. So let me try to share. Let's see.
Well, Bob, the good part about it is you have got a ton of technology people on this call that anyone can facilitate a walkthrough for you. And but it looks like I think you've got things up here. And I'll jokingly say you can thank the state of Maryland for the non-utilization of Zoom, which has us here on WebEx.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I'm going to mute myself and let you have the floor.
I was in the breakout group with Paul Young, and he promised that he would help me. He's an IT guy. So
yeah.
All right. Let me try this. And if somebody could let me know. If you're just seeing me, that's not what you should see. So let me.
No, we see you.
Yeah, you're good. All you have to do is put it on slideshow, and we're ready to go.
Okay,
now,
so
probably what they mentioned here with the dual screens is we're now seeing it in presentation mode.
So, very good.
So we can see your but we can see your notes.
Right.
which isn't necessarily a bad thing unless you don't want us to see your comments.
Well, you can read my notes too. So thank you for having me today. I'd also like to thank you all for what you do. You make sacrifices to be successful in business in your area, in whatever it is that you do, and your contributions make this a great place to employ people and for all of us to live, work, and raise a family. So thank you very much. So let me see if.
Yeah, select your other screen, I believe, and not if that the.
Oh, this is a top secret briefing. Let me see if I can fix this here. Hold on a second. I see I have no.
Yeah, what you have to end up doing is going to, if you probably exit out for just a second and go to your display settings.
Yeah. There you
All right. So let me.
On this call that
Click slideshow.
Yeah, just click slideshow now.
there's a lot of people on this call in the federal space, and when you put top secret on, I'm very nervous.
I figured that. So I have declassified this information. Let's see. Let me see it. There you go. So the following information is authorized for the sole use of helping Maryland businesses achieve success. Any review, disclosure, dissemination, distribution, or copying contents is strictly encouraged. Okay? All about you. Oh. Here, I'm going to try something here. Swap presenter view and.
Yeah, there you go. That's it.
Yep, that's it.
There you
There
go.
you go.
Yep, there you go.
All right. So let's on with the show. You'll see on your screen there a sort of a interactive device that I've used with a couple of classes here. So if either with your smartphone or your computer, you could go to menti.com and use the code 3944029. It's shown on the top of your screen. I'd kind of like to get a sense, as I go through the briefing, if I get a sense of what people are looking for from this presentation, it helps guide maybe some of my comments or discussion points that I might make. So if anybody could try that, and let's see what happens. So www.menti.com, or you can use your smartphone. And
I've also placed it in the chat as well.
Use the code 3944029. And if it doesn't work, then we'll just blow by this and move on to the next screen. menti.com. Give it a minute here. So is anybody seeing anything on your screen? People to access the website?
I was able to pull it up pretty easy on my end, and actually even place the question in here for an answer.
Yeah, place the question
just
too.
to make sure you got it on the back for yourself. So no difficulties on that side.
Well,
But I am seeing a gray box in the corner. I'm not sure what that means.
all right. Well, let's just do, I'm not going to waste time, your time, which is valuable. This is a little tricky here. So I mastered the two screens and I mastered WebEx, but this one maybe just a little bit too far. I was saying in the breakout meeting over the past 8 months, I've used Google Meets, Zoom, GoToMeeting, WebEx. Somebody mentioned Microsoft Teams. I've gotten that one. And then yesterday I used a new one called Blue Jeans. So you can go to bluejeans.com and figure what that one's all about. But they're all do the same thing, a little bit different. So first thing I want to do is add a little context. And I'm sorry that last thing didn't work. So this is the context. During the introduction, I didn't mention this, or Mr. McClarty didn't mention this, but I've been here 3 years, about a month and 5 days. And I was brought here. And this is the context that I was coming into here. So workload. Control agencies, there were 3 control agencies in Maryland that control procurement. One was information technology. The other one was budget management for all services. And then the third one was information technology for all IT. IT, budget management, and general services for all commodities and goods. And actually, you could add a fourth one called public safety and corrections. And that was for all construction-related activities around that. So this is the context that I was coming into here. Procurement was generally viewed negatively from a career track. So if you're doing a job and it's viewed negatively, that's not a good place to be. These are all from several reports that I'll get into in a minute that describe the situation here. The regulations are complex, decentralized, blah, 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 blah. So some of you might know that there are a lot of lawyers here in Maryland. That's one of the things I discovered very quickly. It seemed like everywhere I turned, there was a lawyer. But the bottom line is they create. They're trained, and if there's any lawyers on the line, please speak up. But there's a lot of thought about risk and how to control risk, or rather avoid risk, or manage risk. And as when I got here in 2017, somebody described me procurement here in Maryland's about. There's a lawyer telling me this too. He said, Bob, you got to understand, here in Maryland, procurement, state procurement's all about give and take. Suppliers give and we take. That's the way it is. And I thought to myself, well, that's not a good description. And if I'm a supplier, I don't really appreciate that. So, and I have had a small company at one point. I did some business, but wasn't successful at it. But I appreciate how difficult it is. So moving on here, I'm going to deal a little bit more about context. So here's some of the quotes that were in reports that have been published about how suppliers felt. These are quotes that were from suppliers who were asked to provide input into several reports that the state commissioned, one of which was from the Department of Commerce. They did a blue ribbon report on procurement back around 2015, I think, and I'll have links throughout the presentation where these reports are available. But I grabbed many of these quotes from these reports. So if you're a procurement person, and this is what suppliers are saying about you, well then, what's the context for the buyers? So this is sort of the context in 2016, 2017 that buyers had. They don't feel like they're receiving any training. They're having to do some very complex procurements, solicitations. I was also told when I got here that Maryland doesn't negotiate contracts. And I said, what do you mean you don't negotiate contracts? Well, we do what we call BAFOs, best and final officers. Best and final offers. And that's usually a Q&A, question and answer process where it's all done in writing. Nobody does anything face-to-face, except maybe during an oral presentation of their proposal. But in terms of negotiating a contract, it's not done. And anyway, that again, this is all context from buyers. So here's the background. So in 2013, I think it was the previous governor, O'Malley, who commissioned a report by a company called Treya Partners out of California. There's links here, and I'll make this presentation. I'll remove all the classified markings and make this available, but this is all online. Treya Partners are out of California. They specialize in strategic sourcing, leveraging buying power. They work for the private sector. They work for group purchasing organizations in across the United States. Second report there is from the Department of Legislative Services. It was around 2014. Then there was 2016. That's where I mentioned just a few minutes ago That was that's on the Maryland Association of Counties website, but that is a report that was commissioned by the Department of Commerce. And then in 2016 also, so there was a lot of activity around procurement here. Governor Hogan issued his executive order to modernize state procurement. His Lieutenant Governor, Boyd Rutherford, chaired the commission, resulting in the final report. So I think they started around January and they finished around December 2016, issued the final report. And then quickly after that, in 2017, I think it was Delegate Kirill Resnick. He sponsored a bill to do a lot of procurement modernization activities. And then I came in around 2017. It was about June, so January, yeah, about maybe 8 months into, maybe 6 months into the year. Now, it's curious, I'll say this, what wasn't mentioned, I came from Virginia. I was actually the chief procurement officer, what they call the state senior procurement official for the Commonwealth of Virginia. I don't know if any of you do business in Virginia. They have a system there called EVA, EVA, Electronic Virginia. That was my e-procurement program there for about 5 years when I did that. And all throughout this period here, and I'll mention this 2014, 15, 16, I was getting phone calls to answer questions from people who were doing these reports about, well, how do you do this and how do you do that? And how do you do competitive negotiation, blah, blah, blah. And then around June 2017, May, June, I was expecting another question. They said, well, we're looking for a chief procurement officer. Do you know of anybody who might be interested? And it's an old story. And I said, well, I didn't expect that. And I was getting ready to retire, but I said, I might know somebody, but I need to talk to their wife. So I'll let you know. And she said, yes. So here I am. So anyway, I was brought in here by Lieutenant Governor Rutherford, and he said, well, I need to do a few things here in around this House Bill 1021. And in 2018, it took me about a year to figure out, what we needed to do. So I submitted a work plan to the General Assembly in October 1, 2018. So here we are. So this is what we've done since I got here. Out of the Governor's Procurement Commission, there were about 57 recommendations, of which I've done about 45, 46, 47 of them. Many of them were outside of my, they say wheelhouse, outside of my scope of authority or responsibility to deal with. But all the ones that I could deal with, I did. I designed a central office. I mentioned the four control agencies. We combined those into a single control agency under the Department of General Services. For you Fed guys, it's kind of like the GSA. And then 2018, I submitted that work plan. Then at about the same time, this was a bonus. I got here and they said, well, our statewide e-procurement program, the contract is expiring after 10 years and it expires next year. So in addition to all this reorganization, if you could get us a new e-procurement program, that would be dandy. And I said, absolutely. Having grown up with the EVA system in Virginia since 2000, 2001, I was very familiar with how a system can be, should be, and what works effectively. I'll mention coincidentally that you may have heard of the Governing Institute. In 2016, the Governing Institute, which is no longer around, but they were around for a very long time. The Governing Institute used to rank the states. And so they ranked the states, and let's see, I think there were 35 or 40 states that responded to the national survey. It's a very extensive, very comprehensive, in-depth survey, and the Commonwealth of Virginia was ranked #1 for 3 different things. One of which was its e-procurement system, how it does e-procurement, and it's multi-jurisdictional between higher education, local governments, cities, towns, counties, and executive branch agencies. So their EVA program was ranked #1 in the country. They were also ranked #1 in the country for their acquisition of information technology products and services. So there were 12 different categories that the states, I think it was 12. These were the top 3 that Virginia had. So e-procurement, information technology acquisition, and the third one was its training and education of its procurement workforce. They have something called VIP, the Virginia Institute of Procurement, with a 3-tiered certification of its workforce. So that was one of the reasons why they kept calling me, asking me questions, maybe. But so we implemented that. We issued the RFP in 2018. I think it was around January, February, and we made an award about a year later. And then for those of you who are registered, you might know that around July 22nd of 2019, we actually went live. And that was only about 5 months after we signed a contract, which is pretty extraordinary. But we set the bar low in terms of we really just needed a public bid board initially with some additional functionality that wasn't necessary, but we wanted it anyway, so we got that up and running. Then we had to reorganize the state professionals. There were probably over 45 or 50 different job categories for procurement officers. We narrowed that down to 8. So we identified sort of an entry-level procurement officer 1, a lower-level procurement manager 1, and all the way up to 4. So procurement officer 1 to 4, procurement manager 1 to 4. All of which were described in what I call a career group description, defining the different levels of compensatory factors of complexity, difficulty, value of the contracts that they do, duties and responsibilities. So those were all described. Then we went through, for those of you who may have heard of IBM Watson, we went into the state personnel database. We used IBM Watson, and we swept the database of anybody in the personnel system who touched, smelled, felt like they did anything with procurement. And we scooped up out of about 7,000 employees, we scooped up about 1,500. We put those all on a spreadsheet, and we sat in a room for 2 or 3 or 4 days, went through line by line each person, and the people who actually do procurement in the state were able to identify those who are real practitioners and those who are simply, using a purchase card to buy office supplies and are not really doing bids, proposals, emergencies, sole sources, all the different types of procurements. So we identified that state procurement career group out of the 14, 15, 1,600 that we looked at, that we identified. We narrowed it down to about 200 people, 250 people in the state of Maryland who are actual true procurement professionals. And then we put them all into the new career group. I'll come to that in a later slide. So then we had to update executive branch procurement delegations because everything was channeled up. It was very, talk about choke points. Nobody could do anything. Nobody was authorized. It all had to flow up. So it was very inefficient. So we developed a delegation structure under which executive branch state agencies could actually do procurement. Back to Emma, I mentioned that. We implemented that in July. We established the new Office of State Procurement. That was in October 2019. And very soon after that, only 6 or 7 months, we got hit with the pandemic. So we just formed our new office when we were all of a sudden having to buy masks and gloves and gowns and goggles and all that, ventilators. So the law requires that the chief procurement officer chair these 2 particular councils. Anybody on the line is welcome to attend. It's a public meeting. It's on the calendar for state activities calendar. It's very, I would say, boring, but because I do procurement, I live procurement, it's cool for me. We've had 3 meetings. I have to do them quarterly. And we have a different council there for procurement of health, education, and social services. those two councils are probably going to be combined by the legislators. We said it does. We only meet twice a year for the second council. So we talk about procurement, but really the donuts are made in the first council for procurement improvement. So we talked about combining those. So here's where we get back into the people piece. We developed a Maryland Procurement Academy and a skills competency framework, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes. And then the last box that I had to check was in 2020, where I had to submit my final report to the governor and the General Assembly on everything I've done. And that went a month ago. So there you go. So that's what I've done since I got here. So back to the Governor's Procurement Commission, I'm going to mention this real quick here. Out of the 57 recommendations, these were, in addition to doing the legislation, I had to implement these recommendations for the governor to improve the staffing of the procurement workforce. So I've done all of that. Number 5, I can't really, that's under the OAG's responsibilities. I've worked with them as much as I can work with them, and that's in for them to do. Number 7, I've had some apprentices. We've done that. Number 8, I've reached out to the University of Maryland system to work with their schools of supply chain management, and I'm still working on that. So one of the things we did not have was a mission. So I created a mission. This is it. This is what we do, why we're here, why our procurement workforce exists. So our jobs are to make sure that the agency heads of all of the executive branch agencies get the highest quality goods, services, and contracted solutions essential to meet their public needs. And because this was a transformation effort, any of you who've been involved with transformation know that they typically talk in terms of three-legged stool: people, processes, and technology. So I focused on those 3 components, and kind of brought us to where we are now. So my vision, it's funny, when I was in Virginia, I thought Virginia would be number 1. That was my vision when I started in 2014. In 2016, we were ranked number 2 in the country. So I thought I was being a little too ambitious, but apparently not. People, when you lay out an expectation, people rise to that, what you expect them to do. And so I'm expecting our 200-member Maryland procurement workforce to be the best in the country, if not the world. And I do work with a lot of other countries. I work with the World Bank. I work with all the procurement associations, NASPO, NIGP, and there's no reason why Maryland can't be recognized there. And you might remember, back to the vision piece there for a second, all that context that I laid out in the beginning of the presentation. My objective is to overcome all of that context that brought us to where we were in 2016. And I think having a vision of something much better than that can help us overcome those issues that both suppliers and buyers considered in terms of Maryland. These are the values. I thought about having 3, but deeper I dug, ended up being a little bit more. Simplicity is, of course, integrity is paramount. Fairness, transparency, all of that. So it all sounds good. It's like a word salad, but that's what I look for in everything that we do in our workforce. So here's where we are. We've consolidated 4 control procurement offices under one agency. We've developed a chief procurement officer role. I'm here. I've chaired the 2 councils. And by the way, those councils, they're loaded with some high-powered players. We've got legislators on there, on those councils. We've got Department of Transportation, Department of Health, Governor's Grants Office, Governor's Representative. I mean, so we're talking about procurement at a very high level. So we created our new EMMA program. More about that later, too. I'll get into more detail. My idea was just like the Virginia e-procurement system, it's intended to be multi-jurisdictional. More people that use it, the more benefits we get, the better we can improve it. And I'll talk more about that. And there we are. We're at the new Maryland procurement. So I tried, I didn't have a logo, so I kind of made it up. Still got the hand drawing on that. So I would like the procurement folks from higher education, University of Maryland system. Of course, every county and there's only a couple cities here, but cities and the towns, all the procurement professionals, if we can work together, I think that helps you, suppliers, so that we get to a sort of a common operating model of what to expect. We can manage risk. We can create some consistency. And I think everybody likes consistency. So when I submitted my work plan on how I was going to do all this, first thing I looked at was alignment. What and how is it that we are aligned to how the state is organized? If you think about it, the state is organized around different functional buckets, for lack of a better term, not a technical term. Let's say transportation, education, health, public safety, natural resources, agriculture, whatever those key buckets that the state is designed to accomplish, then procurement and the procurement workforce and the activities that the procurement workforce do should be aligned to their client agencies that they support. So in the old days, the procurement officer would react to whatever somebody needed. You might remember requisitions. You fill out a requisition, give it to procurement, they go out and get it. And all too often in the past, procurement was very reactive. So 1 week, 1 month, you might be buying dog food, or I can remember having to buy fish food for the hatcheries up in the mountains, the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia, where they have trout nurseries. So we'd have to buy the food, and then the next week you're buying, I don't know, bullets for the state police or body armor, or next week you're buying cars. You don't get a chance to get. If you think of it, procurement is in between supply and demand. So we're in the middle. So you need to understand the marketplace and suppliers. And then you need to understand your client and your agency and what they're doing. And then you use the procurement processes in the middle to build a bridge. So if you're going from fish food to body armor to who knows what else, you don't get a sense of understanding the marketplace and the suppliers that operate in that space. Nor do you get a chance to understand your clients and their business and what their missions are. When I talk about alignment, I'm talking about procurement officers who have to understand all that, get used to it, understand the culture, understand the language, understand the markets, the dynamics, all the cost components. So that's what I talk about when I talk about alignment. So our procurement officers will be doing that in the future. Second thing is category management. Once you understand that alignment piece, now you can begin to categorize your suppliers, your contracts, and your needs. Third thing, one thing, I mentioned what I heard when they told me that Maryland procurement was about give and take. Well, that's the worst thing I could possibly hear. We have customers and clients. We have to understand, how do we manage those relationships in a business-like and a fair, transparent way? Same thing with you guys, our suppliers. We need to understand, what your pain points are and what your needs are, and we need to make this. We're all in this together. So we got to make this process understood and have open communications and transparency. Okay, so technology is the tools. So the tools on how we do business, how we do relationship management, how we do category management, how we align ourselves, how we develop the rules and put those rules in a consistent way into a system. That's where technology is the fourth component. And the last thing is people. Back to people. They're the ones that have to make the donuts. So they need to know what the recipe is, what's the market that needs what donuts and so forth. So building effective statewide workforce with the Maryland Procurement Academy to develop a set of competencies, skills, and certifications that serves you and the state. So that was effectiveness. Now this is efficiency. How do we do this? Kind of similar, but back to technology. I think we create efficiencies using a what I call procure to pay, source to settle, source to pay, e-procurement, contract management, electronic solicitations. So, and then being able to integrate that procurement system, invoicing and payment system together with electronic catalogs that serves you so that you can be more efficient. You can find out who's buying what it is that you need to sell, goods or services, IT or construction. So technology is a tool there. Process improvements. I mentioned Maryland's got a lot of lawyers, and they're all good, and they're all very right. All you got to do is ask. So some are just more right than others, but to that point, if we can settle on the right process, then we bake that into the technology e-procurement system. So the processes are made more efficient, they're more consistent, they're harmonized. So that's what I'm working on with process improvements. The other thing is, number 3, delegation of authority. Delegation is very much, you might know that Maryland has a Board of Public Works. So that's another animal. So the Board of Public Works is the constitutional entity that through which procurement is done here in Maryland. So they delegate to me and to the Office of State Procurement, which is our new state central procurement office, $200,000. And then what we do is we further delegate the authority to enter into contracts, $200,000, down to the agencies. Now, some agencies have increased delegation, Department of Transportation for certain construction projects and so forth. So there's exceptions, but generally delegation of authority is, I think it's 200,000, and then we delegate that out, I think 50,000 to the agencies as a general delegation. So we need to make that more efficient. My hope is in the future that we can get unlimited delegation from the board, and maybe or greater, maybe $1 million. And then we can delegate increasing authority to the agencies to enable them to do their own procurements. But there's a problem with that. If you're going to delegate authority to the agencies to do their own procurements, they have to have the right skills, they have to have the right workforce, they have to be organized correctly, they have to have some sort of professional competencies. So there's a set of standards around which we'll do that, and we'll talk about that in a minute. COMAR, for those of you who don't know, that's the Code of Maryland Regulations. In Virginia, where I came from as the senior procurement officer, I had the ability to write my own regulations. Of course, that wasn't done in a vacuum. It was done in an open way with all of the key stakeholders. Here, I don't write the regulations. Somebody else does. So that's the Board of Public Works. The Board of Public Works writes the regulations, and I have to follow them. So it's always, for those of you who might have been in the service, I remember hearing that there's always an issue when you're responsible for something, but you don't have the authority to do what needs to be done. And then it's a problem when you have the authority to do something, but you're not responsible for the outcomes or the consequences of that decision. So there's a disconnect sometimes, and what I hope to do is fix that over time. Training. So efficiency, to be efficient with all these other things, you have to have adequate training. So I'm going to keep going here, but let me take a breath and a glug of coffee here. So I'm on my second cup. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to jump in.
And so with that, while Bob takes a second, are there any questions? Feel free to either unmute and ask your question, or if you want to place it in the chat, you can do so. And I guess maybe if anything, I might just ask a question. So, Bob, obviously you've made a ton of changes and upgrades, improvements, et cetera. What are you, I guess, now starting to see as a result of these process improvements and so forth. And I guess the other thing would be, what are your KPIs and how are you measuring improvements in terms of based upon either what you're hearing or what you're actually seeing with the eye as well?
Those are great questions. I always say that, but they are good questions, and they're. What I have found is that there is an immense hunger to improve things. Immense. It's unlimited. I think things were so gummed up, so regulated, so controlled. And I had many suppliers come to me in the first year where I was just trying to figure out how to get my head around all this. They said, "Hey, look, we have companies here in Maryland. We work in Maryland. We employ people in Maryland. We raise our children here, but we don't want to do business with the state. We'll go to Virginia. We'll go to the district. We'll go to Pennsylvania. We'll go to Delaware. We'll go anywhere, but we don't want to do business with the state." These are big companies, small companies, in between. And I kept asking them to give me, reasons for that. And they did. They delineated a lot of the things that I'm addressing through all of these effectiveness and efficiency issues that I'm implementing are actually going to have a positive impact on all the reasons that were expressed to me why people didn't want to do business with the state. Or if they did want to do business with the state, we were the customer of last resort, which is, you want to be the customer of choice. That's what I want to be. I want you to want to do business with us as a measure. So to your second point about metrics, I've got a slide that I'm going to get into metrics here in a few minutes. So I want to save a little bit of this. But one of the things that I provided a link to the administrative work plan that was submitted to the General Assembly. And one of the things that I want is for every supplier in the state or anywhere matter, but especially our own suppliers. I want the state of Maryland to be the customer choice. When you're asked, who do you want to do business with? I want a supplier to say, I want to do business with the state of Maryland. That's completely upside down from what I encountered when I got here. Nobody wanted to do business. Now, I wouldn't call that a KPI, but again, let me defer that for a minute until I get to that slide. So going forward, that last bullet there, I think, is important to understand. So you may have heard the term strategic sourcing. There's a lot of different definitions for that, just like you find for category management. Category management. I used to work in retail. When I first got out of the Army, I wanted to get into business. I didn't quite know. All I knew was how to shoot big guns and do a lot of blow up things. So I thought, well, I need to get a suit. I went to Jefferson Clothing in Richmond. I bought 2 suits, a briefcase, and I started going to businesses, knocking on doors, saying, "Hey, I'm looking for work." It's not the way you look for work, but anyway. What I was going to say was, I think that I lost my train of thought there, but I think we need to be able to identify common business needs at every level of government, and then we need to work collaboratively together to develop contracts that all cities, towns, counties, higher ed, community colleges, K-12 schools, and state government can use. I think we make it easier, we make it more efficient, and also we make it more open, because we can, you may have heard of managed services agreements, where you have a multitude of suppliers that can come in under the managed service agreement or leave, for that matter. But there's a consistent pipeline of contractors, goods, and services that all of the public body stakeholders can access as a part of that. So that's something that's downstream. Maryland doesn't have anything except for CATS Plus. So we talked about CATS Plus in the breakout session. So there is a one right now, but you could be doing it for tires and tubes and automobiles and other things as well. So that's efficiency. So I mentioned standards. So these are the standards that I created, gosh, back in 1998. And that's the problem when you volunteer. You say, well, I don't like this, and I think we ought to change it. And my boss said, okay, well, go out and do it and come back to me in a week and show me what you got. So anyway, we were having problems in Virginia, and so I created these standards. So standards fall in these 4 different buckets. Okay, how is the procurement function organized? How does it operate within the organization? Then in terms of their program, do they have policies? Do they have procedures? How good are they? Do they follow them? And staffing, how are they staffed? Do they have the right number of people? Do they have the right qualifications, certifications, training? Are they supervised? I mean, if you look at any organization, if the procurement function is located in the basement in the broom closet and it's 10 layers down from the chief, executive, that's not a good place to be for a large organization. So we need to manage and moderate that. And then what are the professional standards of the staff? So I'm addressing all of these here, and the agencies are going to we're going to review the agencies one by one, 5 by 5, 10 by 10, or all at once, but we're going to get it done. And then we're going to identify how they step up to these standards. And then once they reach these standards, then we can give them, they say leadership is not about making the decision, it's about giving away control. So if you can get to a place where you can give the control to somebody else to do the work closest to the point of need to meet the chief executive's mission in that agency, to me, that's what we need to get to. So that's the standards. So we need people that can do that. I'm going to kind of run through these. We created a Maryland Procurement Academy. That sounds really fancy. I have one person. So she's a chief learning officer. I gave her a good title, but she's got a PhD in instructional design technology. She's created certification programs for private sector companies like GM, Ford, and many other private sector organizations. So she's creating a certification program. We just had our budgets cut. She was going to have a instructional designer as a part of her program to help her, and then maybe an assistant to help set up the presentations and chairs and make copies and do all the rest of that stuff. But we got whacked in the last budget cut, so she's back to one. And the chief procurement officer and the chief learning officer together are creating this. So we're focusing on Maryland specific procurement processes. I mentioned COMAR regulations. We've got to train those. There's also what I call procurement practice. You can have all the rules you want, but what's good practice? What does California do for good practice? I think some of the key states in the country, and I'll mention that I'm on the board for the National Association of State Procurement Officials, NASPO. NASPO gives me an opportunity to talk to the other states. I've known them for many years. So there's really several good states, Virginia being one, I mentioned that, but Georgia, Ohio, Michigan's really good, Massachusetts, Utah, Florida's good. There's some other states, but those are probably the top states. But we're going to focus on Maryland-specific processes. Those 200 people I mentioned that we identified out of the 6,000 plus in the state workforce, we're going to professionalize those 200 people in those 8 different categories of procurement officers 1 through 4 and procurement managers 1 through 4. And then the other thing is leadership, integrity, all that. A lot of this transformation is all about changing culture. There's been a culture of oversight, risk avoidance, saying no, not giving control away, making things difficult. So we're going to develop leadership through procurement officers and managers at the agencies and also at the state level. And then we have to manage up to the Board of Public Works and see what happens there. So this is our competency framework, where we've just had our second pilot of 20 procurement officers go through this. It's about a month-long They go through maybe 4 classes a week. Each class is about 4 hours long. We've identified the best practitioners out of the 200 people, and those people have been teaching these classes in all of these different groups of buckets of competencies that the Maryland procurement officers have to have. I'll mention very quickly that, well, we'll get into that in just a second. So this is where we're starting to get our procurement officers. These are the ones who actually do real procurement. They're just not using a credit card, a charge card. They're actually doing bids and proposals. So it's going to be a 3-tiered certification program. You'll see on the right-hand side there, my first priority is on the procurement office. These are the ones who actually make the donuts, okay? These are the ones who actually do the real procurements, about 200 to 300. And mostly those are going to be state procurement professionals. I think in the future, we're going to offer the course to local governments to be able to get a Maryland certification. But for now, we have to focus on the executive branch state agencies because my boss says that's what I have to focus on. So if you'll pardon me a second, working at home, you get the benefit of working with family. I have a 16-year-old Yorkie here. She's indicating that she needs to go out. So bear with me one second. Lizzie. Thank you. So if you don't take care of a 16-year-old Yorkie, you're liable to find a wet spot next to your desk. So, okay. Thank you for that and bearing with me. So the next second priority are going to be what I call procurement associates. These are the last slide I mentioned, that broad competency framework. Well, that's going to be cut down, and we're going to teach people who work in the agencies just the basics. $5,000 or less, $15,000 and less, 3 bids and a buy. You have to have competition. You have to document just the basic fundamental stuff. So we've got a pilot plan for 2021. But again, we're focusing on the first priority, which is the CMPO. We've already got about 16, 20, almost 40 people in the state procurement office who have gone through that. We're going to have graduation probably in the next month, before Christmas for sure. And then we'll start up in 2021 with the next class out in the agencies. And then the third priority is the masters. These are the ones that are going to be the senior managers, chief procurement officers in the agencies, MDOT, human services, social services, public safety, all the big statewide agencies. In Virginia, they've got about 46 really high-level senior procurement people who have learned this. This is a 2-week course, and it's very, very tough. That's our last priority, though. Let me move on here. Next slide. So our training efforts are focused on e-Maryland Marketplace right now. I mentioned I've got an Army of One Chief Learning Officer. So her focus, in addition to having these other people teach the procurement officers, she's focused on supplier training and also buyer training with e-Maryland Marketplace. If you're registered in Emma, then you should be getting some access to information on that. So this is an instructional designer's creation here. She created this for me. These are the 2. So we started out on the left side of your screen, July 2020, with the first pilot. We had 16 participants. We're now in the middle of pilot number 2, going from left to right. We have, if somebody could read the comments to me if necessary, because they pop up, but I don't get a chance to read them before. Mr. McClarty, if you could hop in with anything that you see with regards to comments, or maybe Taylor, either one of you, to let me know any comment that I need to address that
I can
pops
speak.
up.
Not a problem. And actually, Bob, I was just going to ask you roughly, just in the essence of time here, and want to be respectful about roughly about how many more slides left. Don't want to rush you, but also want to be conscious of the time frame we've given our attendees here.
And what's the end time?
We probably can go about maybe another 5 minutes or so.
Okay. So I will make this slide available afterwards. And if anybody has, they can contact me. So thank you for keeping me mindful of that. So to your question, performance measures, I'm looking at 3 different levels. I could have 100 or 1,000 KPIs, but I'm more interested in anything that measures how effective we are. So I have this as a 3-tiered structure. At the bottom, that's the system. How is everything working together to give confidence that the system is working? People, processes, technology. Second piece here, efficient processes. That's more about output. And then lastly, on the top part here, I'm looking at strategic performance measures. So I'm looking at probably 3 measures here, 3 measures here, and 3 measures here, 3, 6, 9 measures. That's my hope, and that's what I've submitted to the General Assembly, and I've got a team that are looking at this now. Emma, this is our email and marketplace. So I mentioned this earlier. This is going to be a solution that's for all state entities and other public bodies. I'm looking at being scalable, flexible, multi-jurisdictional, and provide benefits to all agencies as well as suppliers and citizens. I did have a video here, but I think I'm going to skip that real quick. These are the modules that we bought for the enterprise system. These are the first ones that went live, 1.0, last July. These are the ones that are coming up, the next release, auctions, price lists, and catalogs. And these are the ones that are come in 2.0. So this is going to be invoices and payments. So it's going to be from procure all the way over to pay. And some additional functionalities come in. Here's our roadmap. So 1.0 we've done, 1.1 is coming up. 1.2 will probably be in February, March. And then 2.0 probably going to be in August, September of 2021. And that's going to be the second pilot around that same period. And then finally 2.2, these are all going to take place probably before the end of the next calendar year. Of course, after 2.0, we plan to have advanced analytics and managed services contracts modules. So one thing I'll say is if anybody is familiar with the EVA system in Virginia, there's a report there under their transparency page. It's called the 4.2 report. It's called Who's Buying What I Sell. So if you're a supplier and you want to know who's buying whatever it is that you're selling, you can go into that report and look back over the last 20 years, find out what agencies buy what you do. So how do you prepare for changes? It asks that you register your company. When you go to Emma, you'll find these quick reference guides. I would make sure that there's some online videos on how to prepare, respond to solicitations. We're going to be offering supplier training. Part of the Maryland Procurement Academy, in addition to training our buyers, we're going to be training suppliers. So that's going to be downstream. Commodity code, make sure you use the right commodity codes when you select the business categories in the system. Make sure you check out your competition, see what they're doing, how they're doing it, and tailor yourself to the needs. Contact customer care if you need it. We're here to help you. Reciprocal altruism, a way we help you, you help us. Together, we encourage our local procurement authorities to fully use Emma as much as possible. These are your Howard County Office of Procurement. I'm not going to go through any of this, but this is your Howard County Public Schools. Of course, all of these folks have needs. So if you can address them, get them to use Emma, that would be great. Here's your essential resources. These are links that you're able to use, access. That's it. Join the team. There's my disclaimer after talking to so many lawyers. You know, whatever I said today might be different tomorrow. So.
Well, thank you, Bob. And I just have one question here before we wrap this up. And that is, and because it actually came up probably about 2 months ago, we had a member that was responding to an RFP, and I guess there were some issues either with e-marketplace or what have you. And with COVID and everything else, the challenge was, everyone's working remote. And so being able to actually connect and reach someone. And so kind of, have you, I guess, had that all happen often, or have you given thought to, I guess, how to address those issues when, again, there's some technology challenges, and yet people, you've got a bidder that can't reach anyone because the only number that's public is the office number and people aren't there.
So was it a state agency?
It was, it was a state agency. It had something to do with, I guess, either the production or supplying of PPE or something to that effect. This member is in light manufacturing. And I just know that by the time he called me, he was just like, hey, do you have any contacts with the state of Maryland for purchasing that, the system is either whether it locked them out or whatever, something had happened where he couldn't get to the system. And the big thing, he said, I can't reach anyone because the only numbers that are public are their office numbers, and the voicemails are saying, hey, we're working remote, send us an email.
Yeah. Okay. So if I know you that there was a certain time period where I was probably receiving like 500 calls a day trying to sell me PPE. I don't know when this occurred. I was getting calls from people that I knew in kindergarten wanting to sell me a ventilator or access to ventilators, or they knew a cousin who lived next to a factory in China, and they had, we were just completely overwhelmed. So if we were being responsive to everybody that was trying to sell us PPE, it was a tough time. So we were operating under an emergency declaration, and we had 7 different locations around the state with, we had to provide medical equipment, clinical equipment, consumable medical supplies, durable equipment, and that was not our specialty. So we were struggling under the pandemic to be responsive to all the emergency. And our immediate need was, if we found anybody that had something, we did a contract for as much as we could get, as fast as we could get it. And we had a vetting process. If they were deemed reliable, responsible, reasonable, we struck a contract right there. So for the next 600 people that called, I mean, we just couldn't go there. We couldn't be responsive. Now, we've gone to a more normalized process. So if somebody wants to sell PPE, I would suggest that we just went through a solicitation process. We've awarded like 20 different categories.
Disconnect, because again, I know in his case, he wasn't trying to reach someone unsolicited. It was an RFP that was on the street, and you had to go through, I think, eMaryland Marketplace or something to that effect. And again,
Yeah.
without wanting to get mess the story up. I just know that when he called me, he was like, look, this thing is due, I think either tomorrow or something to that effect. And the system either won't let me in or whatever was going on.
Well,
and he was like, I can't. Yeah. And so his thing by the time he called me, he was like, look, I'm just trying to get to a body. And do you know anyone? And so and that was,
yeah.
So,
well, that's disappointing. I hate hearing that. I do know that we couldn't do everything that we needed to do. We actually went to the department. We got a procurement officer by the name of Jamal Turner. He's with Maryland Transportation Authority, MTA, I think. And we actually got transportation procurement officer to do our procurements for us because we were completely underwater.
yeah.
And so if in the future you or anybody else on this call has any problems, you've got my contact information.
Yeah.
So let me know and refer them to me. I'll be happy to talk to them.
Excellent. Well, Bob, thank you for sharing with us. And for those of you on here, again, this morning, we will follow up with the presentation here, as well as also we'll have an audio recording in the event that if there was anything that maybe you missed note-wise or the other. But certainly want to thank all of you for joining us today, and certainly look forward to seeing you all at other upcoming events, and have a great rest of your morning.